Hello, everyone, and welcome to Elevate, the Business of Art. My name is Emily Osier-Murray, and I'm the Director of Alumni Relations for the School of Fine Arts. I have the pleasure of introducing both Cora Lynn Deibler and Jeff Wamester. Cora Lynn is a professor of illustration and animation at UConn, and Jeff is a director, story artist, and character designer specializing in animation. Currently, he works as a director for Warner Brothers. Before we start, I have a few housekeeping notes to share. Closed captioning is available. Locate the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen and click the arrow next to the closed caption icon, then select Show Subtitle. During this event, you're not able to speak, but you can type your questions in the Q&A section below at the end of the discussion. This session is being recorded, but no attendee info or comments will be shown. You will also be receiving a short survey. If you could take a few minutes to fill it out, we really appreciate the feedback. And with that, thank you all for joining.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us today. We've been having sort of fun catching up. Jeff is an alum of UConn from 2000. Yeah. And that's shocking to me.
Yeah, it is.
And I'm thinking it's probably best to start if you could tell us just a little bit about where you are today and what you're doing and what some of your most recent projects are.
Sure. Right now, I'm working as a director for WB Animation. I basically manage the story of the movies that we have for animation, like DTV, for stuff like Wonder Woman. We just came out that came out for us was Justice Society with Wonder Woman. We have a bunch more movies that I can't talk about after that for the next few years that I'm working on. Before this, I was a director over at Marvel for Guardians of the Galaxy, the animated series. And before that, I was a character designer and a storyboard artist for Ultimate Spider-Man with Marvel as well. It's been a whirlwind and I've enjoyed it. And that's pretty much it.
And how we know each other is I've been a faculty member at the University of Connecticut for the last 25 years, which is shocking when I hear that come out of my mouth even. And before that, I graduated from undergraduate school, Kutztown University of Pennsylvania, Rock, in 1985 and worked as a professional artist before doing an MFA in illustration from Syracuse, go Orange. And after that, I moved into teaching. I work in editorial, institutional illustration, and primarily the children's market. I'm going to put a link in the chat for our audience. This is one of my most recent projects, working with one of my colleagues here at the university, Earl McDonald, a really gifted jazz musician. He arranged By Our Love, and we built a website, and you can see the animation there if you're interested. So Jeff and I go way back, but only recently reconnected to do this little program. So as we were talking the other day, we kind of casually got together. And as we were talking the other day, we ended up talking a lot about how you got your start, actually, like what were some of the early steps. And I was really interested in hearing you talk a little bit about what were the earliest steps, and especially maybe what were some of the things that you felt most prepared for and most unprepared for. And if you could, talk about that for a little bit, we'll go from there.
Sure. I think the way it started when I graduated, in speaking in terms of what I felt I was unprepared, was really was the heavy marketing, the business of how to run your own business as an artist. Because really, when you become an artist, you are running a business. You're basically an entrepreneur without actually knowing that you're walking into that to do that, which I think, when you're younger and the common perception, culturally speaking, is that you're a starving artist when you walk in. I think paints your perception of how it doesn't prepare you to start looking in the right directions on like how to run a business. The thing you're kind of pushed to think is to run away from that. It's like, don't sell out, don't do these other things that make you feel like you're not a pure artist. And I think that's a really heavy misconception walking into that. I think for any art student when they go it, and I think that's normal for art students to feel at first, without exposure to that, because we all do this for the love of it, and we all want to do it for the rest of our lives. And I think I wasn't, when I walked into it, when I first graduated, I had no idea that that's what I had to change my mindset through that. So the first few years where I had a lot of student debt that I had to deal with, and a lot of things that I personally that I had to go through in that process, I started and failed many times in the beginning of it, which was good for me. But I had to go and get a regular day job, and I worked up through doing that, trying to bring as much art into that. I did graphic design and stuff like that in that process. And I ended up working for a lot of businesses, and I started seeing what they were doing as a business. And I started realizing, like, wait a minute, what I need to do is run a business. I can't just like show up, do some art, and someone pays me. That's not how it works. You're providing a service to someone else, and they're paying you money to do that. And you have to respect that process, because someone else is trying to do something their business, they need to know they can depend on you. And once I started seeing that and working my way through regular day job kind of thing, where I worked as like a website developer, and it started moving into data development and these things that I really did not expect. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't until I had quite a few years of that, and I saw all these different levels that I was working with the head of the company and set, regional directors and stuff like that. I started seeing what they had to deal with. And that's when the light bulb really went off. And once I finished that, I moved into, I got married, I had a kid. That's when, things got super serious. I had to make a decision, and I felt like I was prepared enough to do this. And I just took a leap, and the first opportunity I got up that would pay some proper money, I jumped in and I put my full effort into it. I was working 16, 20 hours a day for a while there to make sure I provided the service that I was offering.
Yeah.
And that's when things took off. I went from one job to the next, and really it hasn't stopped since then in different ways.
Now, when we were talking the other day, we did talk about this at some length, and it was kind of interesting to talk about it, but we kind of came to this part of the conversation where we recognize that what makes us really good at what we do, that ability to kind of work on your own, to be totally immersed creatively and intellectually in your own world, not really needing to be social with other people. That makes you good at what you do, but it doesn't work for business.
That's right.
And so we talked about the importance of relationships and understanding how to build relationships. And that always is the more awkward part for us as artists. But can you talk a little bit about how you came to that realization, and then maybe how you addressed it?
So, yeah, and I'm still learning about it now. Like, it's a lifelong kind of process that you have to learn about that. I learned it by watching those same business people when I was working for these other businesses. That was where I first kind of figured it out, because I was watching, I'm sitting there in my corner developing my website,
Right.
And I'm not talking to anyone, but then I'm realizing I'm watching all these people network, and some people, they don't do it in a really positive way, obviously, but I did see some people who were really good at it. And I started realizing, wow, like, they've developed a way to interact with everyone that's a positive for everyone, and that they saw success because of that. And that was kind of where the whole idea of emotional intelligence started clicking, because as you're saying, as artists, we're kind of sitting in a corner drawing and doing our thing, and we're having a blast, not realizing that you're not developing those skills that help you to develop relationships with other people. And you and I both know, like, this business is relationships. It's important to have good relationships, because they're the ones that give you the next job. They're the ones that talk to you about maybe the job 2 jobs from now.
Right, right. And that's also something that if you feel that you're not good at it, it's not hopeless. I do think there's some of that too. When you're starting out and you realize you're sort of on the outside of things, it feels monolithic. Like, wow, how can I get in there? I can't. There's this giant wall, but it isn't hopeless. It is. You have to have some patience with yourself and understand that it is a learning curve. But you can learn how to build better relationships in terms of business, and even just right down to like the nitty-gritty basic baby steps, first steps of like, next opening you go to, talk to some people. Don't just check out everybody's footwear.
Yeah, I was terrible when I first wanted to start throwing my portfolio, and I was like, how do I get to know people? How do I get to people say it? And one of the things that someone had said to me, and it kind of occurred to me when I was like, oh, I kind of made these connections, was anybody that would look at my portfolio, I would show it to them. I would just be like, hey, talk to them for a minute and say, hey, take a look. What do you think? Not expecting a job, not even pushing them for a job, just asking them, what's your feedback? I'd love to improve. And from that point of view, you're already communicating to someone like a prospective art director or someone like that, is that you are looking to grow. And anybody who is looking to grow, people want. They don't want people that are not going to be flexible in terms of like trying to learn new stuff or do new stuff to expand your skills. So you're automatically right from the beginning communicating to someone else that, oh, hey, I'm interested in growing. I'm interested in being easy to work with. I'm interested in as much feedback as I can to grow as an artist. And we probably all know is if someone wants to come to me and they want to grow and they want my opinion on it, everyone's going to want to volunteer that, but it's also the signal that that's given underneath that, which is I want to do this and I'm serious about it.
Yeah, I do think that anybody can project that. You don't need special training to convince yourself to say, you know, I'm serious about this. I want to do it. I sense that in all of our students, they want to do this. And being able to just communicate that and following up with it is really important. One of the things that's certainly changed a tremendous amount over time is the way that you reach people. For example, you know, today, I mean, social media is a giant driver of business. And what I'm interested in finding out from you is, how do you use social media? Because there are 2 ways of thinking about social media. There's social media, the way you do it as just a friendly thing, and maybe you generate a lot of followers, but in terms of business, those are not the same followers you would want from a business standpoint. So I think it might be helpful for us to talk for a few minutes about how you use social media and how you define that differently from just meeting up with your friends online.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think number one, you have to treat it as your business marketing. You can't treat it as your political standpoint or your place that you stand politically. It can't be, hey, I'm at this bar, hang out with me. You know, it can't be that kind of message. You have to treat it like your business front. And that's number one. And I'm going to probably repeat this quite a bit, is that it's the message you're giving underneath that with your intentions. That's what's being communicated. It's not just like, oh, I'm announcing on Facebook. It's the professionalism that you take with your social media that communicates to a prospective employer about what your intentions are. And they're going to read that right off the bat. So it's really important that you have to treat it like your business front. It's your storefront. You can't have people hanging and loitering in front of it. You can't have the sign hanging down. You have to have all of those pieces together. It's super important that you're underneath that is the message you're telling. What's unsaid in that process is important. So that needs to be on point, and everything you talked about on there needs to be from impression point. It can be whatever project you're on, which is great. That's really a great idea. It can be on what you think about the industry. It can be things to help other people. A long time I was posting a bunch of stuff just to help other people. It'd be say, hey, check this out. This is a great tutorial. That always, and it's always about what you're saying underneath, is like how you treat it is what's going to communicate to other people. You have to keep that in mind through this. The other thing is you want to try and post regularly. So there's different strategies for that, which is like I said, was like posting your own project. Great idea. Like there's nothing better than that. There's talking about the industry because it's showing that you have interest and that you're a part of that. It doesn't have to be both of those. It can be one or the other, but as long as you're showing that you're actively working within that and you're moving in that direction, you're showing that you're continually again, to grow, to move forward, to provide service to other people in a professional manner. It's all about what you're communicating to other people in that process. So when you attack social media, that should be the first thing in your mind.
I do think there's also the question of audience. And so I would say, not to counter what you've said at all, but to say that if my work is about politics, if my work is editorial,
Yes.
it's about politics, it's about my view of social, cultural, political events, then that's absolutely appropriate for my
That is absolutely
social
appropriate.
media and my work.
Yes. Yeah.
But I think in terms of thinking about audience, something that I know we have to think about a lot when we're students is our audience at that point tends to be our peers. That's
Yeah.
the audience we care the most about. And we've got to shift some thinking into recognizing that the audience needs to be broader. Like if you're going to actually connect with someone who can pick you out of a crowd and offer you an opportunity, that is a different audience.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it depends on what you're trying to do. Let's say you are someone who's building a business around your social media, which is like, I want to create art, which you can do. This is viable. It's just extremely difficult and rare, but you can build your business around a social media presence and you just sell what you do. That is possible. And that's a different strategy. But when we're talking about kind of, for me, I'm doing a business to business kind of way of approaching it. I don't need 200,000 followers. I'm working business to business. I do storyboards. I do character design for businesses that do larger projects on a regular basis. So what I'm trying to communicate is that I'm providing a service and I can help you get to where you need to be. It's not necessarily for an audience of just random people who are fans of arts. I do post for people who enjoy that, of course, but the point, my target audience is business to business. If you have a different, which is business to consumer, that's a whole different process. And again, like you're saying, if you're political cartoonist or something like that, then that's a whole different thing. And you are trying to talk to a general audience. So it's first pinpoint what you're doing, like what audience or what am I trying to point what I'm doing at, and then make sure I'm focusing on that. Don't mix the signals in that process. That's
also, I think it's also important to recognize too that where I did just say our students perhaps consider their peers right now to be their audience.
Mm-hmm.
But we should also keep in mind that 5 years from now, 10 years from now,
yeah,
then their peers are in a position to offer them perhaps an opportunity. Then your
right.
peers are a creative director, an art director, an editor.
That's right.
And so it's also worthwhile to continue those relationships. So I don't want anyone to go away thinking, oh, I better dump my friends and only think about business.
That's also your target. Like it is true. Like to give you an example to reinforce that, when I got into comics and I was doing trying to get a lot of work in there, I was going to different conventions and stuff like that. I met a bunch of people, like a group of guys that like different ones, but they all knew each other, and we ended up all knowing each other. And it was a group of 5 or 6 guys that I knew, and we were all trying to get into the industry. We all got to know each other, hung out a lot of times after the conventions and stuff like that, and we all became really, really close. And it's funny, one of us got in to animation, and then all of us did. I would not have gotten in if I didn't have those relationships. And I'm incredibly thankful to them. And I'm so glad to have them be, such good friends. And it's that, like you're saying, peer to peer. it was huge to get me in the first place, because these guys vouched for me. They took some of the risk that would have otherwise been very difficult for me to take at the time. And I would not have been able to step in if it weren't for them. So yeah, your students that you are going to class with are critical as you grow and move forward. So yeah, I wasn't trying to imply that though, that isn't important. Yes, absolutely. Peers and people that you work with all along the way are super important.
Oh yeah, same here. And you brought up the R word again, relationships.
Yeah.
It's really, that is really critical. And again, I want to stress for folks who are, watching our program today, that you can be good at that.
Yeah.
You might not ever be as good at that as you are at the work that you do. That's okay. But you can always be better at that.
Yeah.
And it's very beneficial to what you're trying to do professionally.
My closest people that I know were those people that I met at those conventions, just randomly. It was out of chance. And those are some of my lifetime closest friends that I have right now. And I was never one of those people. I was really shy. I was very quiet, very to myself throughout my life, like very lone wolf kind of person, just sat in a corner and drew all the time and didn't talk to many people. And
I remember that guy.
yeah. and it's something I grew out of. And not to say that's a bad thing, but it's one of those things that's realized, like, I can give you an example of me. I honestly, I was the one that was in the corner, not talking to anyone. I was very super shy, very quiet kid. And I once I started expanding and exploring this and exploring emotional intelligence, exploring those things, it allowed me the opportunity to really open up, only because I learned those skills and learned that stuff. So it's an opportunity too, that you want to grow it'll grow you as a person.
And honestly, I will say, I hadn't seen you in what, 20 years, right?
Yeah, 20.
And so the individual
22,
in my imagination was the person I knew 20 years ago. And I was surprised how easy it was for us to have conversation.
Yeah.
And we met up again the other day. And
it was very easy. I enjoyed it.
And this is coming in the form of a confessional. We talked just before going live today. We talked about how bad I am at keeping in touch with my former students. And there are so many. And so I always wish I were better at it too.
Yeah.
I have to say it's something we all work on. We all work on it.
Yeah, it's a lifelong thing, and keep investing in it. I invest in it personally as a person with the relationships that I have in life, and just constantly looking to grow in that relationship, that are going back and forth, and constantly not examining it where I'm like, oh God, why did I say that? It's more of like, oh, where is that coming from? Where are those feelings? And constantly looking to discover myself. Because we as artists, we're always looking out and seeing and understanding everything else, and we forget ourselves. And a lot of times we can understand a lot more of that if we look inside in this process. And if we look inside in this process, you're going to become a better artist no matter what.
The oh God, why did I say that? That for me is just like, Tuesday. It's every week.
It's every week.
But so the relationship part of it really matters, networking, relationships, and it's all, but that's a little bit abstract for a lot of us who might still be in our programs at school or whatever. Yeah. I think maybe to talk about sort of skill-based things is actually important too. You have to obviously bring that to the marketplace. You have to bring that along and be able to offer something that's accomplished. But I wonder if you can talk about the importance of looking down the road and trying to have some patience with yourself about, okay, here's where my skills might be right now, and the importance of continuing to grow, continuing to learn, continuing to practice. I think it's critical to understand that it's never finished.
Yeah.
You're always on it.
Yeah. Like I'm saying with the relationships, it's also a process with your skills. The skills that I've developed, I'm not saying I'm the best in the world. It's more of just like, oh, wow, I can see how far I've come from the beginning of this process to now. It's funny because I'll look in old archives that I have of my art and go, how did I think I was going to get a job? But I also realized, like, you have to have a little bit of that audacity and be open to the fact that you're going to grow, and just lean into that and realize I'm incredibly thankful that I got to do this job, because I wouldn't be able to develop the skills if I didn't have that, because I would only been doing it in my spare time, it would have taken longer. But the fact that I can do this every day, all the time, has been a huge help in that process. And it was kind of one of the dreams in this process was I wanted to just get better at this. And I was like, well, if I get a job, then I can keep getting better while someone pays me to do it. And, you know, it's a lifelong process is what I'm getting at. And that no matter how far you go, I feel like now that I'm like, oh, wow, I have so much to learn. And I've been doing this, the career for 15 years, but before that, I was working towards that. And then before that, I was practicing to go to school to do that. It's an ever growing process. And, you know, even talking right now, it makes me very grateful. The fact that I just kept diving in, you know, I'm thankful I had the opportunities, and I'm thankful that I had done that, because the stuff that I enjoy doing now is really fun. The better you get, the more fun it gets. And, because you keep getting the results. So it's not like there's a lot of other things that you can do in life, like sport and stuff like that, where it just gets slower and slower and slower and smaller and smaller. But, you know, with art, it's one of those things I'm super thankful for, is that you can keep growing so much. There's so much to learn. I would say just keep that in mind with both those things. It's like the relationships and your skills. Keep that in mind and keep pursuing it, because it will pay off.
I think it's often good to stop yourself and look back, like you said. Oh, I look back at my college work and think, oh, how did I ever, you know, get anywhere? But I remember your work being really good. So there's that.
I appreciate that.
But I think to take the longer view and do stop yourself, and every now and then look at what you did 5 years ago or 3 years ago or 2 years ago. And because if you are improving incrementally, you don't really see that in the day to day. You might every now and then you might do something. You're like, wow, did that come out of me? That's great.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But I think, you know, looking past a body of work that's a few years old really shows you then what the changes have been.
Yeah.
And also I want to ask you, when you left school, so I knew you as a pretty goal-oriented person, like you had ideas of what it was you thought you would want to do and how you might get there. And admittedly, when we're in our programs, we all of that is kind of an abstract.
Yeah.
But it's good to have. It's always good to have a plan and go after it. And eventually, you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, I never would have seen this, who I am here today.
Oh yeah.
You know, you always have kind of a plan, and then you meander around and finally get somewhere, and it's a little different from where you thought you would go.
Way
different.
different.
So I'm wondering, when you first started to think, okay, I'd like to improve. I'd like to improve what I'm doing. Before you were employed, what kinds of things were you doing to improve your technical skills and improve the way that you were working and the way you thought about narrative, visual narrative, stories? What kinds of things were you doing to, like, just improve yourself, to teach yourself? Because ideally, when you leave formal education, you haven't become a finished product. Ideally, you've kind of learned how to teach yourself. So what kinds of things did you do to take that forward?
So when I first started, the hardest part was learning how to teach myself. I mean, it was one of those things where I walked out and I had guidance up to a point, you know, and before that, all I did was draw, and it wasn't really teaching myself. I was just saying, hey, let me grab a piece of paper and going at it because I enjoyed it, you know, and I would just do it whenever I wanted to. And it wasn't until after college that question had to be asked, like, okay, because the first couple of rejections, you're like, oh, I need to get better at this. And so that makes you ask your first question, which is like, how do I do that? And at that point, I didn't have any idea. So idea number one as well, first thing I can do is just do it more. So I just added to it and did it more, which I just kept doing. But there were other things like, well, you know, a couple of years pass, you're getting better, but you're like, I'm still not there. And you start going, well, how can I find out other ways? So I just started reading. That was a big help. And it started coming where it was like, it was getting hard. I started realizing how hard it was, and then realizing I'm not improving fast enough to get to that point. How am I going to make these 2 points come together so that I can make that happen? And the big thing I did was I just read a lot of books about art or anything related to it. So I read books like Understanding Comics. I read books about like the beauty of art. I can't remember what the book is off the top of my head. All kinds of, any book that came to me that was anywhere related to what I was doing, like film and cartoons and comics and life drawing, anything I could get my hands on, I was reading it. And I at that point, when I started realizing how much information I had available to me that I just didn't realize was at my fingertips, I was ingesting books so fast. I was getting books and reading them in one day. I was getting books and reading them within a couple of days if it was really big. I couldn't believe how much I was absorbing in that amount of time, because I was getting hungry. The time was running and my skills were not moving fast enough, and it pushed me really hard. And I welcomed that and just went after it as hard as I could. Those, I can tell you, every day, every one of those books that I read, and some not so much, admittedly, because you get to the end, you're like, wow, that gave me nothing. But
it happens. Yeah,
it happens.
They're not all home runs.
They're not. But it was also, in that process too, finding a bad book. It's like, oh, that's probably not the kind of book that I need to be a little more careful about what I choose so I don't waste any time. But I was just reading every book I got my hands on, and then drew as much as I could. And I started realizing some of that information was seeping into what I was doing. And I
Do you
started
listen to audiobooks in your studio?
What's that?
Do you listen to audiobooks in your studio?
Oh yeah.
Because
Every chance I get.
I do have to say, one of the other things we talked about casually the other day was the role of reading and writing in our professional art careers, and how that's like a hidden thing. It's not what we think about. We think about the making pictures. We think about drawing, painting, either traditionally or digitally, or sculpting or printmaking. We think about those things a lot. But we underestimate or don't talk about often the actual role of reading and writing and how important that is. And yet at the same time, I feel like as a longtime teacher, part of what I can see is that for students who are really visually gifted, sometimes reading and writing can be a little more challenging.
It was
there's
for
some
me.
real science behind like different parts of your brain and what you use and what, what's strong for you. So not everyone has that same affinity for reading and writing. And I think it's good to know that if you're not a great writer, feel free to always put your writing in front of someone who you know is, and have them check out what you've written. If you're going to send a letter off to important email off to a potential client or editor and art director you're trying to impress, have somebody who is a good writer look over your stuff. Or if you're needing to write a bio or a press release, have someone help you with that. And if you are, if you struggle with reading, audiobooks. Some audiobooks and listen to that stuff while you work. You are able to listen to it while you make pictures. I can't listen to words while I'm trying to write something. For some reason, those two things don't live the same moment in my head.
No.
But I can listen to words while I draw.
I have conversations with my wife all the time. She's like, are you busy? I'm like, I can draw and talk at the same time. I know it seems crazy, but it's two different parts of the brain that are actually working at the same time, and you're capable of doing it. To give you an example on that, and hopefully inspire people a little bit, is like I have a learning disability, which is called auditory sequential disorder. And I didn't learn the alphabet until I was like third grade, at least not in order. So it's kind of like audio dyslexia. So when you hear stuff in your head or you hear words, you have trouble keeping those things in order. Sometimes a word will come, a sentence heard will come in the wrong order. So when I was trying to read or I was trying to write, it made that much more difficult because of the way I was hearing stuff in my head while I was doing it. And it was something, what I'm trying to get at is the way I overcame that was that I started trying to read stuff that I enjoyed first, like novels and stuff like that really interested me. That helped a lot to start. And then the other thing I did was, even when I was writing my friends or someone I knew, it wasn't like a Twitter, like just, word vomit on it. I would try to formally write that. I would try to write it in good English and try to be clear and practice just a message, because you could write an email every day and you're kind of writing part of a paper or writing something where you're being clear, and it helps you to organize your thoughts and learn how to organize your thoughts as you're working through that process. So if you can, you pick a pen pal or pick a friend or someone you can write every day on an email. Just tell them about what's going on, or tell them about what happened, or even tell a joke. Whatever it is, make it formal when you're doing it. Tell clear sentences with a verb in every sentence and not run on and work on all the structure. It will help tremendously when you go to business, when you go to run your business, because it will teach you how to do that. And that is another, what's not said is what's said in that process, is like when you take that seriously and you are still warm while you're writing, but also being able to really well structure a sentence when you're writing will make a huge difference in how people perceive you in that process. Because if you're just like one-offing like half a sentence or run on, people are gonna read that about you, and they'll be like, well, this person isn't as serious about what they're doing.
I think I need your advice. I think I'm gonna have to do that. It makes you a bit of a little more of a team player then, if you're thinking about the other person too, which is important.
Exactly.
Again, it's that thing of relationships, and where we feel like as individual artists, we lose that part of the realization that actually you're a team player, you're doing your stuff and you're going to fit it into a process in which a lot of other people are involved in all kinds of different forms of publishing or creating a project. So that's important. So I've got one more question, then I think we're going to do some Q&A.
Can I give one note really quick about that? I think I just forgot exactly what my point is, trying to interrupt to make the point. When you're doing that, what's the one thing you see on any job interview or a job post? Good communicator. It's on every job post. It's a really important skill, and I really do emphasize, like, take the time to learn how to be a good communicator. Like you said, it's telling people that you're a team player, but that communication, like especially what I do, where I work with 10, 20 people, right? And I have 10, 15 people under me doing storyboards and working with other people, as well as working with a boss who's trying to communicate something he wants me to do. It's so important that you understand how someone else feels, like how to be warm in the email, how to talk to people, like make them feel comfortable, how to clearly communicate and be able to understand what they said. And it all comes from first saying, how do I communicate to someone else?
Yeah,
it all comes from there.
So if I can ask you one more question, is you're in a position now where you're able to hire other people. And what do you look for when you hire someone? We know the kind of the obvious skills, technical skills to be there. What are some of the other things you're looking for then? Communication, technical skill, we've talked about those. What are some other things that you look for?
It is definitely, like I was saying, it was definitely the warmth and communication that they have on the follow-up. So like if say I'm talking to someone and I'm looking at them to be a possibility to work with us, is one of the things is like, the first thing you're looking for is this person going to be easy to work with? Do they know how to communicate with me and listen? Are they capable of listening to what I'm asking for, and not just taking what I'm saying for the words, but understanding like, oh no, whatever we're trying to communicate is actually more nuanced than just saying, oh, it's not like, hey, go add 1 + 1, come back here with the answer. That's not when we're doing, especially when we're doing movies like this stuff, is we need to know that when I'm communicating something, you are searching for exactly what I'm saying, not just on the surface, but what's underneath on that, what I'm trying to imply in that process. It's so important that you're able to read that kind of stuff, because my boss, like, he's trying to articulate something, and it's not easy for him to articulate. I've gotten good at listening and reading exactly what he's asking for. And he doesn't even have to finish the sentence because I'm listening. Okay, what does he mean? What's underneath this that he's really trying to get at? It was one of those things where, as I was moving my business along and I had clients, I started learning how to not just listen to what they were saying, but what they were actually asking for. Because most of the time when you have a client, they're not an artist and they don't know what they're asking for. They just know like, oh, I want something like this, right? You have to read between the lines on that and go, oh, what are they actually asking for? They may have said this, but what's underneath it that they're actually asking for? What are they responding to in this other art or this other stuff that they're seeing that they actually want, but it's for them, for what they're trying to do? Because they don't want you to copy that. They want you to understand what they like about it, even if they don't. And you have to read that and carry that through. So it's not just being able to, it's being able to receive information, but understand what's underneath that and following through on that, and then even taking one step beyond that. And it also comes from like that initial talking to them through that, and then their professional appearance like online. That's huge for us, like being able to read, because if we don't know them, we have to be able to get all that from all these other interactions.
Right. I've got a couple of questions here. There's one here that follows up, I think really nicely addresses something that's probably common for students who are new to the field. An anonymous attendee asks, how do employers view people with a portfolio with multiple disciplines represented in the portfolio? Meaning animation, storyboard, character design. Right. We could expand that even if you're coming from many programs. You might have some life drawing, you might have some typography, graphic design, you might have, there are many things. So I'm gonna ask if you could address that.
Okay, so I think that's a big, a lot of mistake that I see in portfolios personally when I'm presented with that stuff, is that it's kind of a schizophrenic portfolio. It's, oh, I have life drawing, oh, I have character designs, I have storyboards, I have some collages I did, I have this, and you're just like, those are all fine, but what does that have to do with me? Because when I'm looking around, I'm looking to hire someone. If I'm looking through a bunch of collages and they're like, I want to be a character designer, you're like, I have no idea if you can do that or not. I can't tell from that. When I was doing this process, I used to go every time, whether I was going to a gaming convention or animation or comics, I specifically built the portfolio for not just like, if there was a main target that I had at that convention for a specific, like either animation company or comic book company or any of that, I knew exactly what kind of art that company did. I knew what they would be looking for if they're looking for a new artist. And I specifically tailored my portfolio for that possible client.
So it's all about the research and reference.
I would spend time, a day, at least several weeks before it, and say, who am I going to target and what do they want? Like, what do they need? What's their need that they need fulfilled? And then I would build the entire portfolio on that idea.
I think we're so used to getting assignments and being assignment driven in our programs that it becomes hard to conceive of that as a valuable activity. Like, okay, if I already have 3 great character sheets, I can simply sit down and make more.
Yeah.
And then have a portfolio. Like, it seems too easy almost to do it that way. But I think there's a lot to be said for researching the people who you're wanting to go to, learning about what they do. And then it also helps you to understand you've got to help solve their problems.
Yeah.
That's what you're going to be doing. You're going to help solve their communication problems. You're going to assist those editors, creative directors, art directors with your great work. And so I think that's worth noting.
You're a visual problem solver. You need to walk in and solve someone's problem.
Yeah. And so there's another interesting question here too. Do you have advice for someone who may have had imposter syndrome set in? In other words, we often don't feel ready.
Yeah.
We're waiting to feel ready before we'll do something. We're pretty sure that when we're ready, we're going to know it. We're going to suddenly feel way better about ourselves
You
and our work.
never,
And we're
you
going
never
to
are.
feel like, yes, I am ready now.
No,
You
yeah,
know,
there's
you might
never
feel
a
that for
point.
like 30 seconds and then you move on. So
Yeah.
can you address how maybe you deal with that feeling of, I just don't know if I'm good enough, and it prevents us from doing things. So how do
Yeah.
you deal with that?
I think the mindset about it is number one. So first off, no matter how old or how far you go, you're going to have some feeling of that. Just understand and accept the fact, and actually it happens less when you do accept it, is that you're going to feel that way. It's a normal thing to feel those things when you're an artist, to have the imposter syndrome. It's everyone feels it, no matter how far you've gotten. So I don't think like you get to a certain amount of success and that's going to go away. It never does. But it's seriously drops when you accept that is a part of being an artist. It kind of goes away mostly. You kind of realize like, and because once you kind of do that and accept it, you start to realize that this whole thing is a journey. And I know this is a trope and a cliche and all that stuff, but you have to think of it that way. You have to be thinking like, this is where I start, and every step of the way I grow. And that you are you're moving from one place to another. You're not looking for a destination, and you're not just looking around where you are. It's a process, and that you should, how I got into animation, how I did this was a crazy story. And I thought back, 10 years ago, I thought,
Do
this
tell.
is nuts.
Yeah.
I'm
Because this addresses
stressing out.
it addresses another question that's actually in the feed that I was going to go to. So yeah, carry on.
So I'll give you I don't want to go crazy on long it, but when I first started getting into comics, it was that thing where I was learning that process, and I wasn't very good. I was just trying to get into it, and I didn't have a choice because I quit my job and I jumped in. But what was crazy is I did comics for several years, and I developed relationships and got great friendships, and I thought that was kind of where it was going. And it was crazy because I had a friend who started pitching me in animation, and I was at a point in my life where the bills were catching up with me. I had a baby and a kid and house stuff, and I was stressing out. I thought, like, there's no way I can continue this because I can't make enough money doing this stuff. But it was crazy because one of my closest friends was pitching me to this company saying, hey, you should come out and start doing animation. And I was like, no way, I can't do that. Move my family out to California and do this. This is crazy. But my wife, huge thanks for her. She's like, well, why don't you just take a flight and see what happens? And I was like, all right, more debt, let's go for it. And I jumped on a plane and I went out. And what was crazy is I made my portfolio. I went out there and I literally dropped the portfolio, and the guy says, you're hired. And I was like, what? I had gotten nothing but rejections up to that point, not realize, I had jobs here and there, but it was just like, and he literally hired me on the spot. I worked that day for them. I went back a week later, sold everything in my house, jumped on a flight, and came back and worked a week later. And I haven't stopped since then. And I guess one of the things I really want to get at when I'm telling that story is keep working, because you never know where this journey is going to go. You never know what's going to happen. And that those incredible things you're going to look back on when you're stressed and stuff like that are going to be huge, wonderful memories. That's a huge memory for me of like, I just went through the craziest part of my life, the most stressful, the craziest things I've ever gone through, and thought everything was going to come crashing down, and everything changed because I kept with it and I stopped thinking that I'm not worthy. I just kept going and going. This is how it's going to go. It's going to have up and downs. It's going to have crazy stuff. And I welcome that. I want that because I get to look back on that and realize, man, that was crazy and it was awesome. So
Yeah.
don't walk into this thinking that it's all about like, I have to be good, or this is my career, or like all this. Just think of it as it's okay to have that imposter syndrome. You're always going to feel like that. The most important thing to realize is like, one day I'm going to get through all of this and I'm going to look back on this and go, wow, that was awesome. Just see it as a journey, because you'll get closer to the mid or back end of your career and look back on those times when it was difficult and relish them in a certain way.
Yeah, I think the first step, the individual who asked that question was an anonymous individual. I think the first step is to recognize that that is a thing and that you understand it, that it happens. And that way you can think yourself around it. You know, you can just kind of accept those days where you feel like, man, I guess I shouldn't apply for that, you know, and then understand, let yourself feel like that for a little while and then go past it and
just go past it and just
because other people are.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, other people are, why not you?
Yeah. Everyone feels like that. Everyone has to deal with that.
Why not you?
Yeah. Why not you? It can be you. There's no reason why it can't, because trust me, anybody I know that has seen this stuff, they felt the same way as me. They had the same problems. They had the same issues. They had the same tough parts. And they just said, look, I'm just going to walk through it because that's a part of this journey. And any journey has ups and downs and doubt.
I'm still pretending to be both an illustrator and a teacher. And look at me. No, you know, it's a joke, but it's true. I think everybody feels it from time to time, and understanding that can be very helpful for anybody individually. Someone else asked a question here. How can someone who got sidetracked in another career leverage previous contacts to make a shift or make a change and move in a different direction? And I think that goes back to something we talked about again the other day. We talked about the value of having a professional network and not just having it, but using it. You know, don't just join a professional organization and then sit back and put the card in your wallet. It's like join a group and meet some people and get active. And because you don't know where you're going to end up 5 years from now. And you might find that some of those people come along with you on your little trip. And to look back and say, like, 20-year-old Jeff, would the 20-year-old Jeff Wamester recognize 40-year-old Jeff Wamester?
No, I look back on it and no way. Like I do look back on like, wow, like when I was 6, 7, 8, and I picked up those comics and said, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I had no idea that I'd be sitting at WB Animation, you know, directing movies. I never thought that would happen. It was kind of a wildest dream, but you know, it's one of those things where if you pursue it, you're going to be surprised how far you get if you keep those things in mind. If you keep those things where it's like, this is a journey, I accept it, all the ups and downs, those things, and you work super hard, it will get you there.
Yeah, and that transferable skill set that we've kind of been referring to throughout of good communication skills, loving, researching, and referencing, being, you know, available and flexible, and adopting a mindset that your goal is to kind of help somebody put their project together, being a creative problem solver. All of those things are not specific to one form of applied artwork.
Yeah,
those things are transferable to so many different fields in visual art, visual narrative, but also other fields too.
Yeah, a big part of my career that I've seen recently that paid off was that time that I took a veer off of my career. I took a right, this is left. I took a left turn on what I didn't expect. I had to get into this. I had to do these things. And at the time I thought, oh, I'm doing this the wrong way. Oh God, I'm going to lose this. But now when I look on it and I have my career now, I realize, oh my God, the skills that I got in that have been a huge boon to the decisions that I make now. If I didn't have that, I would be struggling in certain ways now. If I didn't have that experience and I didn't walk in and say, hey, that experience of doing that taught me keep sticking with what you want to do. Don't give up. And 2, wow, there's all kinds of skills in another field that I could transfer to this. There's always transferable skills. I worked at Domino's. There were transferable skills. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
It was the idea of service was what I got from working from Domino's, is like how much of a difference serving other people in that process made.
Yeah. there's just one other thing I think to quickly touch on, and then we'll say our thank yous to folks. But there are two questions about social media, and they're somewhat related. It's about the
Sure.
almost full-time job that social media can be if that's going to be part of your business.
Yeah.
So how do you work with that? What are your sort of rules around how much time social media maintenance takes up for you?
I think more of it should be, as you're working, is try to answer people as much as you can online. So post, if you're posting once a week or once a month, as someone put it, it's like, look, if you're going to post something, have it be steak, not hamburger. So if you post something, have it be good if it's once a month. It's okay to do that, but always try to interact with people when you're doing that. You're trying to develop relationships with everyone, and you're showing that skill as being someone who's warm and open to other people and experiences. It does make a difference, because there's lots of people that I know online that I've met later on, like, oh dude, I met you on this and I did this, that I meet afterwards at conventions, that we just talked a little bit back and forth. Two of my closest friends, that's exactly what happened. We just kind of talked to each other once in a while online, and then we met at a convention, and then we hung out for a while. We had some beers together and had some dinner, and then we got to know each other's family, and all of a sudden we're having Thanksgiving and Christmas together every other year. It's like something you didn't expect, just because you're like, hey, I love your stuff. And he said, oh man, I love your stuff. That was it. That was the equation. And then we met each other in person, and it was just like, and that was the same person that helped me get into animation.
Yeah, I think it's about being prepared for opportunities, because you don't know what they are or where they're going to be. You want to predict that as much as possible, because you just want to know, but you can't really know. You just have to
you never know where it's gonna come from.
Yeah.
I think, but the priority when you're thinking about that isn't like when you talk to people online, the goal is like, oh, they're going to give me a job. That is a big mistake. Never ever walk in with relationships like they're going to get me a job. Just get to know people. That other stuff will come all by itself if you treat people with respect and try to get to know people, even if it's just online, in a genuine way. The other stuff you don't need to worry about. That will come all by itself. I never asked for them to give me a chance on animation or to do that. I never asked for that. I never even looked for them to do that. It was more of just like, I got to know people and kind of like work together through that same struggle. And that same struggle made us bond. And because we went through that struggle, we've been there for each other in this entire process.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to finish up. And speaking of gratitude and being grateful, I want to say thank you so much to everyone who joined us in the audience today. We've got a really good turnout, and I'm really grateful for you all to be here. And I especially want to thank Emily Auger-Murray and Lauren Davies from the UConn Foundation, who were the first ones to reach out to us and say, do you want to do this? And it seemed like something fun and interesting, and it's far more fun and interesting than I even predicted to go along with our in the spirit of things of not being able to really predict. So thank you to everyone, and thank you to UConn and the foundation, and thank you, Jeff. It's been great to reconnect with you after all this time. Let's not be out of touch for so long.
Yeah, let's not be strangers.
Yeah, or I'll be in assisted living, and you'll have to come see me there. So but yeah, let's not be strangers. I think that's a good thing to leave with everyone.
Yeah, I think so too. If anyone wants, I'm online all the time. So if you guys have questions about your career and stuff like that, jump on. I'm on Instagram. It's my name. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitters, Facebook, all that stuff. I'm there. And if people want to know questions about the career or how to grow, I'm always around. I love helping people. This is one of the reasons I want to get on this, is because I want other people to go on this journey. I loved it, no matter how tough and crazy it got, and stressful. I'm still incredibly thankful that I got to go on that journey, and I want everyone else to have an experience of, like, hopefully mostly positive in the process, but to go through that journey, because it's worthwhile. It really is.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, and thanks for being here. And I'm not sure who's responsible to shut this party down. if that's us, or
I
if
don't
it
think
is
so. I
our,
think Emily's the host.
our bosses.
We'll take care of it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Have a
Thanks,
great day.
Emily.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Lauren.
guys so much.
Bye.